For 3 years, Julian and Caleb existed in a performance. Caleb feigned love, and Julian feigned belief. It all unraveled when the twisted metal of their car became a cage, and the performance ended. Caleb finally tore away the mask, his voice raw, confessing he was sick of Julian's entitlement, his demanding nature. He spat out the question of how anyone could ever love him. Julian's gaze drifted downward to the steel rebar that pierced his abdomen, a dark metal branch growing from his own body. He whispered an apology, promising it would never happen again. He was, after all, dying. The world had exploded in a deafening crash, a violent somersault of vision and gravity. An eternity later, Julian's eyes fluttered open. The one remaining headlight cast a ghostly glow on Caleb, slumped in the passenger seat. Julian's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against a roaring tide of tinnitus. His own voice was a stranger to him, lost in the din, as he begged Caleb to wake up, not to die. Caleb couldn't die, not yet. There was something Julian still had to tell him. A ragged cough broke the silence. Caleb stirred, his eyes opening. He tried to move, then realized his shoulder and right leg were pinned by the crushed frame of the car. A low, bitter laugh escaped his lips. He accused Julian of being impatient, of orchestrating the crash to kill him after luring him back to the States early. Julian's body was a numb landscape, his mind a frozen lake. He could only ask what Caleb was talking about. Leaning back against the contorted seat, Caleb's usually placid face was fractured with cold fury. He told Julian to stop playing dumb. He claimed that Julian's father had hired a driver to kill his parents years ago, and this was just a repeat performance. He expressed surprise that Julian's father would gamble with his own son's life. This was not true. Couldn't be. Julian frantically slammed his hand on the car horn, the blare a desperate plea for attention from any passing vehicle. He told Caleb, his brow furrowed in pain and confusion, not to make accusations without proof. Caleb turned his head, his blood-streaked face a mask of derision. He sneered, asking what Julian thought their entire relationship had been about. It was all for this, he said, for collecting proof of the Davies family's crimes. He wondered what other reason there could possibly be. Julian's lips trembled, but no words came. He knew. He had always known Caleb's confession of love. The beginning of their life together was a means to an end. He had known it for 3 years, but he couldn't refuse the chance, because he had been secretly in love with Caleb for years before that. A secret crush turned into a reality, a beautiful, poisonous lie. He had stubbornly believed that somewhere beneath the deception, Caleb must have cared for him, even just a little. He clumsily changed the subject, his voice hoarse, suggesting they should call for help. The cabin was a wreck in the dim light, and neither of their phones were visible. Caleb's response was chillingly calm. He presumed the call Julian wanted to make was not to 911, but to someone who could come and finish the job. Julian quietly denied it. Caleb's gaze was sharp, analytical. Julian's usual hypersensitivity meant the slightest wrong word from Caleb could trigger a storm of fury. His current quietness was an anomaly, and it made Caleb suspicious. He asked if Julian was hurt. Julian admitted he didn't know. His eyes hadn't adjusted to the darkness, and he couldn't see anything clearly. His body felt weightless, devoid of strength, but a symphony of pain was slowly beginning to play, awakening in every nerve. He assumed it was the normal aftermath of such a violent impact. Caleb's voice was flat, stating that Julian was likely fine. He had never been a resilient person, Caleb remarked, unable to tolerate the slightest pain or grievance. Julian knew Caleb didn't love him, But now he understood the lack of love was laced with a deep-seated resentment. He remembered the times he called Caleb with a minor cold, demanding he leave the office, stop at a specialty market for ingredients, and come home to make him soup. He would cling to him for days afterward, insisting Caleb accompany him everywhere, an ever-present chauffeur and companion. He'd concoct sudden whims, demanding Caleb drop a major project to join him on a spontaneous weekend trip to Paris or Monaco. In Caleb's eyes, Julian Davies was a spoiled, irrational tyrant. But Julian was never like that with anyone else. With Caleb, he was testing boundaries, constantly seeking proof. See? No one would endure this without a reason. Therefore, Caleb must love him. A faint vibration buzzed from outside the shattered windshield, accompanied by a weak glow. Caleb's phone. It had been thrown 15 feet from the car, illuminating a patch of gravel and debris. That explained the lack of passing traffic. The impact had sent them careening off the road, plunging them into a 30-foot deep ravine. In the dead of night, on this remote stretch of highway, the horn was useless. With Julian's phone missing, they were utterly alone. If they didn't find a way out, Caleb's injuries could worsen, becoming life-threatening. The car's Bluetooth could still connect a call. Julian laboriously lifted his arm, trying to start the engine. His legs were pinned, but he could just reach the brake pedal. As he pressed down hard, a strange, tearing sensation pulled at his midsection, but he ignored it. The ignition button was useless. The car was dead. Outside, the phone stopped vibrating. The world plunged into absolute silence, and then even the one functioning headlight flickered and died. A moment later, they heard the soft, rhythmic patter of liquid striking the ground. Caleb identified it as gasoline. He laughed without humor, telling Julian that if his father didn't get here soon, he'd be blown up right along with him. Julian insisted that wouldn't happen. Groping in the darkness, his hand brushed against Caleb's warm skin. Caleb flinched, asking sharply what he was doing. Julian retorted that he was going to strangle him. His fingers traced the line of Caleb's neck and shoulder until he found the mangled metal of the seat back pressing down on him. With a surge of strength, he wrenched it back. There was a sharp crack as the metal bent, freeing Caleb's arm. Simultaneously, an indescribable agony erupted from Julian's abdomen. He bit down hard, leaning back against his own seat to swallow a scream. Caleb quickly freed his other arm and began desperately trying to force open the passenger door. It was too badly damaged. The entire car frame shook with his efforts, but the door held fast. A cold sweat beaded on Julian's skin. He shivered, his voice suddenly small. He asked Caleb if he ever liked him, even just a little. 3 years ago, Caleb had found him. He asked Julian to be his boyfriend. Caleb was tall, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to swallow Julian whole. Dizzy and overwhelmed, Julian had answered with a breathless yes, the words sounding like it belonged to someone else. He had replayed that moment 1,000 times, memorizing every detail. The late summer night, the faint stars, Caleb's pale blue shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal the defined muscles of his forearms. In their first month together, Julian had tried to live out every fantasy he'd ever had during the 7 years he had secretly loved Caleb. Then he overheard the phone call. Caleb's voice was low, telling someone on the other end that yes, they were together. He assured them not to worry. He didn't like Julian. He explained that as soon as he found the evidence of Mr. Davies's criminal activities, he would break up with him. Julian's father. His relationship was a shortcut for Caleb's investigation. His hand froze on the doorknob of his own apartment. He asked himself if he should end it. The answer was no. He wasn't ready to let go, and he believed in his father's innocence. He was a good man, so Julian decided to give Caleb another chance, just one. He started to act out, to push every limit, to do things that looked to outsiders like pure cruelty. He'd make Caleb wait for hours, buy him garish ties and demand he wear them to board meetings, have him deliver pastries to his office only to decide he wanted something else. Through it all, Caleb remained a silent, stoic pillar of supposed tolerance. Julian's assistant would sigh about how gentle his boyfriend was, how much he must love him. She had no idea of the ferocity that lay beneath Caleb's gentle facade at night. But she was right about one thing Julian had told himself. Caleb loved him. He looked over at the man beside him in the darkness and repeated his question. His voice barely a whisper, asking if he was liked. Caleb seemed to have given up on the door. He turned to face Julian, his words precise and devastating. He informed Julian, carefully and clearly, that in their 3 years together, there was not a single moment when he had ever liked him. Julian accused him of lying. He felt a profound chill and looked away, unable to meet Caleb's eyes. He questioned why Caleb would sleep with him if he didn't like him, why he would break down a door when Julian was having a tantrum, why he would silence his rants with a kiss. Caleb was the picture of logic and stability, a man everyone trusted. Julian, in contrast, was a provocateur, constantly trying to rip away Caleb's perfect mask while terrified of what he might find underneath. He was easily angered but also easily soothed. When Caleb carried him to bed, he would cling tightly to his neck. Caleb would murmur for him not to be afraid, that he wouldn't let him fall. His anger would dissipate. Later, when Julian was tired, his hands slipping from Caleb's sweaty shoulders, Caleb would grasp them, bring them to his lips, and slow his rhythm, calling him baby in a raw, husky voice. The memory couldn't warm him now. The cold was seeping into his bones. He heard Caleb's voice cut through the haze. He said it was because Julian was easy, a convenient release. What man, he asked, would say no to that? A gunshot pain tore through Julian's chest. He froze, the world stopping for a few seconds before he could draw another breath. He said he understood. The sword that had hung over his head for 3 years had finally fallen. There was no shock, only a strange and brutal clarity. Caleb slammed his shoulder against the door again, his voice strained. He began to say something else, but a long, loud honk from above cut him off. Had a passing vehicle finally seen them? A wide beam of light washed over the wreckage, and the rumble of a large engine grew closer. Caleb twisted, shouting something out the window that was lost in the sound of another horn blast as the vehicle sped away. He slumped back into his seat, explaining it was just a passing semi-truck. The driver probably hadn't even seen them. Julian sat perfectly still in the darkness, his breathing shallow. After a few moments, he asked Caleb if he had found the evidence against his father. Caleb was silent for a long time before admitting he hadn't. Julian told him he never would, because his father wasn't that kind of person. He explained how his mother had died when he was 6, and how his father had raised him alone while running a company, never remarrying. He spoke of how much his father adored him, giving him everything he ever wanted, with only one unbreakable rule: never break the law and never hurt anyone. He added with a small, sad laugh that his father had actually liked Caleb, and had even bought him a birthday present. It was, Julian supposed, because his father loved him so much and by extension, loved the person Julian loved. Caleb seemed about to protest, but Julian cut him off. He didn't want to hear his cynical remarks or his false pity. He suggested Caleb look for answers from a different direction. Caleb fell silent, so Julian continued, prompting him to consider who had told him his parents were killed by Julian's father. It was Marcus, his uncle, wasn't it? The implication hit Caleb immediately. His denial was sharp, absolute. Even in the pitch black, Julian could feel the weight of his stare, cold and devoid of emotion. Caleb accused him of investigating him. Julian admitted that he had, and that he'd found some things Caleb wouldn't want to believe. This was why he had insisted Caleb cut his business trip short and fly home. His uncle, Marcus, was not the clean businessman he appeared to be. The car crash that killed Caleb's parents was likely his doing. And tonight's crash, Julian suspected, was also his uncle's handiwork. Caleb scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. He accused Julian of trying to frame his uncle now that the murder attempt had failed. He didn't believe him. Julian had expected this, but he was running out of time. In the brief flash of the truck's headlights, he had seen it. A crimson stain spreading across his chest and stomach. A length of steel rebar had impaled him from behind, pinning him to the driver's seat. He was dying. He couldn't let Caleb hurt his father. He told Caleb to open the glove compartment. After a second's hesitation, Caleb complied. It was too dark to see. Julian instructed him to feel around inside. On top was a manila envelope. He told him to make sure he read it himself once he was rescued. Then he would have his answer about who was framing whom. The consciousness he was clinging to with sheer willpower began to fray. He was so tired. He just wanted to sleep. Suddenly, Caleb asked what the small box was. Julian blinked slowly, his voice a low murmur. It was his birthday present. Caleb's tone softened, becoming deeper. He said Julian had told him he wasn't getting him anything. Before Caleb left for his trip, they'd had a huge fight. Julian had been furious that the last-minute trip ruined the birthday celebration he had planned. He had stood between Caleb and his suitcase, arms crossed, telling him to just go, that he could forget about birthday wishes or a gift. He had declared he was going to forget Caleb's birthday entirely. Caleb had looked at him, then walked over, lifted him out of the way, and told him not to be so childish. People only become childish in front of those they love. Julian hadn't said it. Caleb had held him, his face buried in Caleb's shoulder, feeling the vibration of his chest as Caleb said that having Julian was enough. He didn't need a gift. Looking back, Caleb's performance had been flawless. So flawless that Julian had truly believed he was loved. Still, he had said that buying him a gift was something that made him happy. More vehicles roared by on the highway above. Julian was jolted awake by the sound of Caleb smashing at the window. Caleb's breathing was ragged. He told Julian to take off his jacket, that his own wasn't thick enough to wrap around his hand. Julian could smell blood, but couldn't tell whose it was. Maybe Caleb had cut his arm on the glass. But he couldn't move, couldn't take off his coat. He stayed perfectly still, telling Caleb he was cold. Besides, the jacket was custom-made, and he'd have to pay to replace it. Caleb's voice was a low growl through gritted teeth. He told Julian he was hopeless, that he should just stay in the car forever. Julian felt a flicker of a twisted, schoolboyish glee at having provoked the person he loved. But Caleb wasn't a schoolboy. He wouldn't be won over by his petulant games. He hated him. As he drifted into unconsciousness again, he heard Caleb call his name. He had no strength left. With his eyes half closed, he whispered for Caleb to go find help, to leave him behind. He probably wouldn't make it anyway. Caleb's voice seemed to sink into the ocean, fading away, then surging back, crashing into his ears. Julian's eyes opened. He turned his head, bewildered, and saw Caleb striding towards him. Caleb wasn't wearing a tie, his suit jacket unbuttoned. Julian looked around. He was in an airport. The terminal was full of people, but they were all frozen in place. A dream. He was dreaming of the day before their second anniversary. Caleb was yelling, his usual composure gone. He asked what Julian was doing in Johannesburg, if he had a death wish. He grabbed Julian's arm, his grip painfully tight. Then he saw the red stain on Julian's white shirt and swept him up into his arms. He told him he was hurt, that they were going to the hospital right now. Julian laughed, a carefree sound, and explained it was just spilled wine, not blood. He felt a pathetic thrill at Caleb's concern, but then reality set in. Caleb was probably just afraid of losing his leverage. The thought soured his mood. He struggled out of Caleb's arms and snapped at him, asking why he was yelling. He reminded Caleb that he had been the one who said the diamonds in South Africa were the best, refusing to buy rings anywhere else. He threw a small, velvet blue box at Caleb's chest, telling him he could throw it away if he didn't want it. The box fell to the floor. Caleb picked it up and opened it. Inside were 2 rings, each with a modest diamond set flush in a simple, elegant band. They were brilliant but understated. Caleb looked at them for a long time, then his expression softened with exasperation. He told Julian there was armed conflict in the region, asking if he knew how dangerous it was. Julian said nothing, his eyes downcast, letting Caleb pull him into an embrace. Caleb's heart was beating faster than his. The stubble on his chin was rough against Julian's cheek, but he didn't pull away. He didn't apologize. He just mumbled that Caleb had to wear the ring and never, ever take it off. Then he closed his eyes. It was so warm, like being genuinely and truly loved. If it could always be like this, he thought, he would be good. He would never throw another tantrum. But the dream was shattered by an urgent voice calling his name. It was Caleb again, telling him to wake up. Julian forced his eyes open. He felt Caleb shaking his arm and wanted to tell him to stop, that it hurt. But before he could speak, Caleb told him he'd broken through the window. Now he needed Julian's help to pull his right leg free so he could climb out and get help. His hands were guided to Caleb's knee. Caleb grunted with effort, pulling at his trapped leg. Julian bit his lip, summoning his last reserve of strength to pull on Caleb's pant leg. Caleb let out a long, frustrated groan and fell back against the seat. It had failed. Julian slumped to the side, completely spent. Caleb patted his arm, panting, urging him not to give up, that they had to try one more time. Julian closed his eyes, whispering that he couldn't. He had no energy left, and it hurt too much. Caleb's voice was sharp with a rage Julian had never heard before. He asked if Julian could stop acting like a child, if he had to throw a spoiled tantrum even at a time like this. Julian looked up, a spark of his old mischief in his eyes. He said he would help, but only if Caleb said he loved him, that he liked him very much. He had tried this tactic before. Caleb had never given in, but he'd never been cruel either. Sometimes he would just gently tell him to stop fooling around. Other times he would crush his mouth in a fierce kiss. But today Caleb was truly furious. A cold laugh escaped him. He told Julian he was sick of his entitled, childish whims. How could anyone possibly love him? It was strange. He knew Caleb didn't love him, yet hearing the words still felt like his heart was being squeezed in a vice. He breathed out slowly, trying to say he understood, but his throat felt like it was filled with sand. The joke was ill-timed. He should be ashamed. He had a lot to be ashamed of. His arrogance, his cruelty, his terrible temper. He looked down at the steel rebar protruding from his torso and whispered that he was sorry. He was sorry for making Caleb so unhappy for so long. He promised it wouldn't happen again. Perhaps it was the unprecedented apology that made Caleb pause. In the darkness, he spoke, his voice low. He began to say that if Julian could just, in the future, 2 sharp horn blasts echoed from above. This time, they heard a voice shouting down to them, telling them not to be afraid, that rescue was here. A flood of light poured into the ravine. Caleb turned and looked at Julian. In the disorienting glare, Julian thought he heard a ragged, panicked breath. The light source swayed, the spots before his eyes flashing brighter and brighter. Footsteps and voices swarmed the car. Someone shouted for medics, that there was a trapped victim with severe injuries. The driver's side door was quickly torn open. A rescue worker prepared to cut the rebar. He warned that the procedure would cause extreme pain and called for someone to hold the victim steady. Julian lifted his heavy eyelids and saw Caleb's face, pale and stricken with terror. He stood frozen behind the rescuers, his lips moving but making no sound. Julian blinked, then slowly worked the ring off the 3rd finger of his left hand. With a trembling hand, he held it out towards Caleb. His voice was a faint, weak whisper. He told him that now he was free. His fingers went limp. The ring fell, hitting the ground with a soft chime. Julian could hold on no longer. He closed his eyes. He heard Caleb finally scream his name, but there was no one left to answer. The pain vanished. He was standing in front of the car, an observer at his own rescue. Caleb was kneeling on the running board, leaning in to hold him. He cradled Julian's chin in the crook of his shoulder, just like he always had, but his arms were slack, as if afraid to apply any pressure. The sound of a power saw filled the air, and sparks flew behind his body. Caleb whispered in his ear, a frantic, repetitive mantra, telling him it was okay not to be afraid. But the face resting on his shoulder was ashen, the eyelashes still. Julian silently thought that there was no need to soothe him anymore. He wouldn't be making a scene. He was being very good. Was Caleb satisfied now? Caleb seemed to realize this too. He stopped talking and began to tremble uncontrollably. They were put into the same ambulance. Julian's breathing stopped for a moment, and every medic swarmed around him. Caleb, his own head wound ignored, sat numbly to the side, his face smeared with blood. His red-rimmed eyes were locked on the heart monitor. One of the medics noted the jagged wound and excessive bleeding, wondering aloud if the victim had moved inside the car, aggravating the injury. Caleb's breath hitched. He spoke, his voice rough. He admitted that Julian had. He had tried to start the car. He had used all his strength to bend back the twisted seat. And at the end, he had been forced into a contorted position to help free Caleb's leg. And after all that, when he was fading, he was called selfish and spoiled. The monitor shrieked with alarms. Caleb looked like a man thrown into a stormy sea, forgetting how to breathe. His back was ramrod straight, his entire body a bowstring pulled taut to the breaking point. The ambulance sped to the hospital, where Caleb was barred from the trauma room. He stared at the closed white doors, lost. A nurse approached, telling him that he was also injured and needed treatment. When he didn't respond, she stepped in front of him and saw his vacant eyes, as if he were oblivious to his own wounds. She repeated her request. Caleb answered with a non sequitur, whispering to himself that the dripping sound wasn't gasoline. It was his blood. The nurse asked what he was saying. Caleb's legs gave out, and he slid down the wall to the floor. He asked in anguish why Julian hadn't told him, why he hadn't said he was so badly hurt. The nurse knelt beside him, offering comfort. She suggested that when one person is severely injured, their companion might hide the truth to prevent panic, to allow for a clear-headed rescue. She said he must have cared for Caleb very much, not wanting him to worry. Did he care? Julian stood beside them, asking himself the same question. He supposed he did, but not anymore. Another nurse came out of the elevator, holding the manila envelope. She asked if it belonged to Caleb, explaining it had been found at the rescue site. Caleb had forgotten the most important thing. He wasn't a careless person, especially not with the evidence he had spent 3 years seeking. Julian watched, confused, as Caleb mechanically took the envelope and set it on the floor beside him. He opened and closed his hands, revealing the blood-stained ring resting in his palm. He had forgotten the evidence but remembered the ring Julian had thrown away. It was so unlike him. A few minutes later, the elevator chimed. Julian's father rushed out, his eyes red. He saw Caleb, hauled him to his feet, and demanded to know what had happened, how a simple airport pickup had turned into this. Caleb's eyes finally focused, and tears welled. He explained that a truck had run them off the road and into the ravine. His father staggered, asking if the driver was found, if the police were called. Caleb nodded and handed the envelope to him, explaining that its contents were likely connected to the crash and should be given to the police. His father opened it, his face paling in shock after reading the first page. He asked Caleb if he was sure that the documents implicated his own uncle. Caleb's expression was empty. He said it didn't matter. None of it mattered now. His father raised his hand as if to strike him, but the blow landed on Caleb's shoulder as a heavy, weary pat. He told him to pull himself together, that Julian would be okay. But as he said it, his own eyes filled with tears. He sat on a bench, his head in his hands, and Julian saw the sudden bloom of white in his hair. He sat beside his father and heard him speak to Caleb. He asked if Caleb knew that his silly boy had been in love with him for a long, long time. Caleb, leaning against the wall, turned his head slowly. His father looked up, the skin around his eyes a web of fine lines. He told Caleb they had met as children, though Caleb had probably forgotten. They weren't that young, 12 or 13, old enough to remember someone special. Julian's father had been busy then, so Julian spent his holidays at the corporate office. He was given a conference room to do his homework, but he used it to play CEO, watch cartoons on the giant projector, and sing into the microphones. Then one day, his father brought in another boy and told Julian to call him his older brother. It was the son of his business partners. The boy would be studying here too, and Julian could ask him for help. Julian had just grunted, pretending to read. The door closed. The boy sat at the far end of the long table. Julian peeked at him over his book, then slammed it shut in defiance and started making as much noise as possible with the laptop on the podium. The boy got up and left, probably to tattle. Julian ran to his seat, intending to hide his books. Just as he picked one up, the boy came back in. Startled, Julian knocked over his glass of water, soaking the books. But the boy wasn't angry. He quickly dried the pages, saying it was fine. His mother had covered them in plastic. Julian looked at the neatly covered books, with their crisp corners, and was suddenly overwhelmed with a feeling of lack. The boy knelt down, tilting his head to meet his eyes. He apologized, saying he had forgotten Julian didn't have a mother. He took one of his own books, carefully removed the cover that already bore his name, turned it inside out, and wrapped it around Julian's tattered, dog-eared textbook. He asked for Julian's name. Julian mumbled it, his head down. The boy carefully wrote the 2 words, Julian Davies, on the new cover. From then on, Caleb's name was hidden on the inside flap of his book, on the other side of his own. His father's voice, soft and heavy with memory, pulled him back. He told Caleb that his foolish son still had that book cover. Not long after that, Caleb's parents, at his uncle's suggestion, had pulled their investment from his company. So they didn't see each other again until Julian got into the same university as Caleb. Caleb's voice was a croak. He asked if Julian chose that university because of him. His father looked towards the operating room doors and gave a bitter smile. He confirmed that yes, when Julian found out where Caleb was, he started studying like a man possessed. On his 18th birthday, after he got his acceptance letter, he came home and told his father he'd only managed it because he was in love with someone. When he asked who, Julian had stammered that it was a man. He thought his father would be angry, would hit him, so he'd curled up on the floor, covering his head. But he could never hurt him. It didn't matter if he loved a man or a woman. He made money so Julian could be happy. When he retired, if Julian wanted the company, it was his. If not, he'd sell his shares and they would travel the world together. As he finished speaking, the operating room doors burst open. A doctor rushed out asking who would sign the consent form. The patient had catastrophic internal injuries and was in critical condition. Caleb pushed himself forward, taking the pen with a trembling hand, saying he would sign. His father gently pushed his hand down, saying he would do it. The doors closed again. Caleb stood frozen in the middle of the hallway like a lost animal. His father buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with choked sobs. He wondered if he should have sold the company years ago. His child had never gotten to travel the world with his dad. He had never been properly loved. Hearing this, Caleb's body jerked as if struck. He fell to his knees. He was sorry, he whispered. It was all his fault. Julian didn't look at him. He moved closer to his father, rested his head on his shoulder, and cried, telling the old man not to be sad. He wasn't going to die. The moment the thought formed, he was pulled into a dark vortex, a dizzying fall into a bottomless abyss. He snapped his eyes open and found himself back on that night, 3 years ago. A massive yacht, the end of a business gala. His father had already retired for the night, but Julian lingered on the deck, unwilling to leave while Caleb was still there. As the deck lights went out, Caleb called his name. Now, standing in the darkness, Julian watched the scene of his own false confession unfold. The version of himself in the memory had a look of pure adoration, about to say yes. No, he screamed at himself. Don't believe him, Julian. You idiot. So this was where it all went wrong. He shouldn't have agreed. He shouldn't have known Caleb didn't love him and played along anyway. He was so arrogant, thinking his love could magically make the lie real. A white-hot pain seared his heart. He squeezed his eyes shut, and when he opened them again, he was staring at a white ceiling. He hadn't died. He was lying in a hospital bed, weak, his hand held in a tight grip. He turned his head and saw Caleb's face, gray with exhaustion, break into a small, relieved smile, as if he were the one who had survived. Caleb lowered his head, pressing his forehead to the back of Julian's hand. He whispered that Julian was finally awake. Masked by an oxygen tube, Julian blinked slowly, then, with great effort, pulled his hand from Caleb's grasp. A month later, his father asked if he was still unwilling to see Caleb. Julian, propped up in bed eating apple slices a nurse had cut for him, just shook his head. His father told him everything had been sorted out. The crash that killed Caleb's parents and their own recent one were indeed his uncle's doing. Marcus was in prison now, likely for life. With everything settled, he said, Caleb wanted to apologize in person. The day Julian woke up, Caleb's presence had caused his heart rate to become dangerously erratic. The doctors had advised Caleb to stay away. For half a month now, he had stood vigil outside the hospital room door. His father said Caleb would only enter the suite's sitting area when Julian was asleep, watching him through the glass partition of the inner room. He asked Julian if he hated him. Julian shook his head. It wasn't hate. He just didn't understand why Caleb was so insistent on getting forgiveness from someone he claimed to despise. It was a pointless endeavor, and Caleb was not a man who did pointless things. His father took the small bowl from his hands, telling him not to eat too much so soon after surgery. He sat on the edge of the bed and stroked Julian's hair, smiling. He said his boy was growing up, able to handle his own affairs, but he felt that adults should talk things out clearly. He remarked that the two of them currently resembled a young couple in the middle of a Cold War. They weren't a couple. They never had been. A dull ache started in his stomach, and he curled up under the covers. His father was right. He and Caleb needed a formal end. So when it was time to move to the rehabilitation center, Julian didn't try to avoid him. Caleb saw him emerge from the room, his face a mixture of surprise and nervous hope. He approached Julian, his voice gentle, asking if he could drive him to the center. He mentioned he had bought some things for him, that they were in the trunk. Julian looked him straight in the eye and said thank you, but no. He told him they should say everything that needed to be said right now, and then never see each other again. Pain flooded Caleb's eyes. He raised a hand as if to touch Julian, but let it fall back to his side. His voice was raw as he told Julian he knew everything now, about them meeting as children, about him choosing his university. Julian cut him off again, his tone cool. He said that was all in the past. What they needed to clarify was the future. He informed Caleb that he would have his belongings removed from his apartment today, and that his lawyer would be in touch about transferring his shares in Caleb's overseas company. Caleb interrupted, his voice thick with apology. He shouldn't have listened to Marcus, shouldn't have treated Julian's father like a killer. He shouldn't have said those things, shouldn't have hurt him, shouldn't have missed his injury and demanded his help. He just kept repeating he was sorry. Julian offered a placid smile. He said the thing Caleb shouldn't have done, above all else, was get involved with him just to use him. But, he said, he accepted all of his apologies. And though he couldn't bring himself to say it was okay, he did his best to sound detached, declaring that their business was finished. Caleb looked as if he'd been struck. As Julian walked past him towards the elevator, Caleb grabbed his wrist. He said Julian's name, his throat working for a moment before he finally got the words out, asking him not to break up. Julian pulled his arm free. He turned his back to him and recited Caleb's own words from that overheard phone call. Once I have the evidence of his father's crimes, I'll break up with him. Who said that? He asked. Have you forgotten? Behind him, Caleb stood as if struck by lightning. On his third day at the rehab facility, Julian saw Caleb again. He was wearing the same dark gray suit from the day he left the hospital, his chin shadowed with stubble. At first, he was just a silent specter at the door of his room, following him to the gardens and the tea room. After Julian shot him a glare and complained to the staff, Caleb started wearing the facility's pale blue orderly uniform, complete with a ridiculous, face-hiding mask, and stood openly in his path. Julian wanted to scream but didn't have the strength. He told him tiredly that there was no need for this, that he shouldn't do pointless things out of guilt. Guilt was meaningless. It didn't make the injured party feel any better. But Caleb insisted it wasn't guilt. He stood opposite him, silhouetted against the light, his face obscured. It was just like 3 years ago. Julian tensed. Then Caleb spoke, his voice solemn. It wasn't guilt, he said. He just didn't want to break up. He loved him. Julian had thought he was over it, but at those words, a roar filled his ears, and a sharp pain pierced his temples. A wave of nausea washed over him. He stumbled into his bathroom and retched violently. He was vaguely aware of Caleb rushing in after him, then quickly leaving. All he knew for sure was that he ended up on his bed, covered in a cold sweat, a nurse injecting something into his arm that slowly calmed the storm inside him. Curled on his side under the blankets, he could hear his father's low, furious voice and Caleb's choked apologies from the other room. The doctors said the vomiting was partly due to his fragile digestive system, but mostly it was psychological. His father arranged for a therapist and moved up their world tour. That fall, Julian saw the sea at Izu for the first time and the red maples of Shizenji. In Nara, while he was feeding the deer, a man standing far away from them was knocked over by a buck. Julian started to go see if he needed help, but his father stopped him, remarking that the man looked shifty, so it was no surprise he got knocked down. Julian laughed it off. They went to Manila and Bohol in the Philippines, then to the UK to watch the sunset from Calton Hill in Edinburgh. They arrived in Aspen at the end of December, the peak of ski season. His father, claiming his old bones couldn't take a fall, stayed at the hotel spa and told Julian to be careful. After a morning on the bunny slopes, Julian felt confident and strayed onto an expert run. He saw a snowboarder bombing down the hill, about to collide with him, when a tall figure in black swooped in, wrapped an arm around him and cushioned his fall. As they landed, he heard a sickening crack. Bad news. A bone was broken. Good news. It wasn't his. He scrambled up and with the snowboarder helped the man. The figure in black was curled on the ground, groaning in pain. Julian apologized profusely, offering to call for an ambulance. The man just waved his hand, not speaking. Julian felt even worse, assuming the man was mute. He knelt down, assuring him that he would cover all his medical expenses. The man froze, staring at him through dark ski goggles. When the ski patrol arrived with a stretcher, the man began speaking to them in fluent German. The language was nothing like English, but the cadence, the tone, it was strangely familiar. Julian took a guess. He said Caleb's name. The figure flinched and lowered his head slightly, a clear sign of guilt. Julian yanked off his goggles and was unsurprised to see a familiar pair of eyes. A surge of inexplicable anger washed over him. He asked Caleb what he was doing here. Caleb looked up at him, a desperate, speechless expression on his face. Julian stood up, towering over him. He said fine, he would leave Colorado immediately. As he turned to walk away, two hands clamped around his calf. Caleb's voice was a low, desperate rasp, begging him not to go. The surrounding paramedics and tourists shot Julian disapproving looks, as if he were a monster. To save face, he gritted his teeth, helped Caleb up, and took him back to the hotel. He dumped Caleb onto a sofa in the lobby and turned to go upstairs. Caleb scrambled to his feet, trying to follow on his bad leg, and ended up falling as the elevator doors opened. Julian called for a bellhop, but no one came. He closed his eyes, cursed under his breath, and then looped his arm through Caleb's, dragging him into the elevator. He stared at the doors, asking what floor. Caleb coughed, a repressed, painful sound, and said 2103. Julian snapped that he just needed the floor, not the room number. He glared at Caleb and noticed his face was flushed, and the arm he was holding was radiating an unnatural heat. He frowned and asked if he had a fever. Caleb, his face hidden by a mask, nodded. Julian exploded. He asked if he was trying to die, coming skiing with a high fever. He told him if he wanted to die, he could do it far away from him. He shook him off and retreated to the far side of the elevator. Caleb looked up sharply, his eyes wide and shimmering with a strange emotion. He said it had been a long time since Julian had yelled at him and asked if he could do it some more. It was as if he was getting some sick pleasure from it. Julian called him a pervert. The doors opened, and he bolted for his room. The next morning, he and his father were on a flight to Italy. The weather in Rome was mild. They visited the Vatican museums, the Pantheon, and the Colosseum. At the Trevi Fountain, Julian again got the feeling he was being watched. As he looked around, his father asked if he'd spotted Caleb yet. Julian was dumbfounded. He asked his father if he knew. His father scoffed, saying he'd seen him back in Nara. It was impossible. He was the one who got knocked over by the deer. It slowly dawned on Julian that Caleb had been following them since the beginning of their trip. His father, sitting leisurely by the fountain, confirmed it, adding that Caleb had even flown back to the States twice for business and then immediately caught up with them. Caleb had to be insane. Julian sighed and asked his father if he had a coin. When his father asked why, Julian explained it was the famous wishing well. He was going to wish for Caleb to get a grip and stay away from him. His father laughed, telling him that would be difficult. They had banned people from throwing coins in years ago. Halfway through their trip, a financing crisis hit his father's company. They flew home overnight and had a series of emergency meetings with investment firms, but none came through. Without new capital, the company's cash flow would dry up. The next step would be massive layoffs. The thought of hundreds of people losing their jobs kept his father up at night. Then, out of nowhere, a brand new investment company contacted them, offering to cover the entire shortfall. Julian didn't believe in miracles. He went to the company's office unannounced and, as he suspected, found Caleb. The office was tiny, barely big enough for a desk and a chair. He slammed the door open and demanded to know where Caleb got that kind of money. Caleb stood up and answered honestly that he had sold his companies overseas. Julian stared at him in disbelief. He asked if he was crazy, selling his entire net worth to gamble on him. Caleb looked down, his voice steady. He wasn't crazy, he said. He would only go crazy if Julian wasn't okay. Julian was completely bewildered. He asked Caleb what had happened to the rational, objective man who always weighed the pros and cons. Why was he acting like a rebellious, immature teenager? It was ironic. He was now saying the very words Caleb used to say to him. He should have refused the deal. But if the price of his pride was hundreds of jobs, it felt selfish. In the end, they accepted the financing with one condition. All future meetings would be handled exclusively by Julian's father. His father happily agreed, and as an added term, declared that from now on, Julian would be washing the dinner dishes. 6 months later, the company had stabilized. It was the end of the year, and the annual company gala was in full swing in the ballroom atop their office building. Julian started with juice, but somehow it turned into champagne. He hadn't had a drink in a year and a half. One glass wouldn't hurt. As he raised it to his lips, a hand clamped down on his wrist. Caleb's face was grim as he told him his health was still fragile. He couldn't drink. Julian's face hardened. He asked what business it was of the investors and told him to get lost. He tried to drink again, but Caleb snatched the glass and downed it himself. Julian scanned the room, not wanting to make a scene and ruin the festive mood. He took another glass from the champagne tower. Before it reached his lips, Caleb had taken that one too. Julian glared at him and grabbed another. Caleb met his gaze and drank it. Back and forth they went, Caleb downing a dozen glasses. It was so childish, so absurd. Julian finally lost his patience, hissing at Caleb that if he was sick he should see a doctor, not bother him. He had one father already, he didn't need another. Caleb's cheeks were flushed, and his eyes had a new intensity, fixed on Julian with a mixture of seriousness and pleading. Julian turned away, but Caleb grabbed his arm and pulled him out onto the terrace. Now that they were alone, Julian let loose. He screamed at Caleb, asking why he was haunting him. Why was he still with him if he hated him? Why was he helping him? Why did he care? What kind of act was he putting on now? When Caleb didn't answer, Julian grabbed his arm and bit down, hard, not letting go until his own jaw ached. The sky was dotted with a few stars, occasionally lit by distant fireworks. Caleb still hadn't let go of his arm. He just watched him, his brow slightly furrowed, the fireworks reflecting in his eyes. In the quiet that followed, Julian heard Caleb whisper that he didn't hate him. Julian asked what he said. Caleb repeated it softly. He didn't hate him. He wasn't acting. He looked like a large, wounded dog. Julian scoffed. He said only a fool would believe him. He tried to leave, but Caleb wrapped his arms around him from behind, his voice urgent. He said he had proof. He let go, and with trembling hands, pulled a silver chain from under his shirt. On it hung a simple, plain ring. He took it off the chain and held it out to Julian. He explained that he had made it himself at a workshop the day before their second anniversary. He wanted to make it by hand to give to him on the day, which was why he'd made excuses about not liking the rings available locally, afraid Julian would buy some first. His voice grew smaller, pained. He never expected Julian to actually fly to South Africa. He said he had regretted it for a long time but was afraid of Julian's temper, so he never showed it to him. Julian laughed coldly. He told him if he was going to invent a story, he could at least be more creative. Rings like that were a dime a dozen. Caleb shook his head, pressing the ring into Julian's hand, telling him to look. Their initials and the date were engraved on the inside. He had carved them himself. Julian took it, and in the next motion, flung it over the railing into the massive fountain in the plaza below. He looked at Caleb's pale face and reddened eyes and spoke each word with precision. He said even if he hadn't hated him for the past 3 years, what did it matter? Now, he said he was the one who hated Caleb. 3 in the morning, Julian sat bolt upright in bed. Caleb was an absolute bastard. He was infuriating. He was making his head spin. He had been tossing and turning for hours, unable to sleep. He couldn't stop thinking about it. Was the ring really engraved? Did he really make it himself all those years ago? A workaholic like Caleb, who scheduled his life down to the minute, would never do something so time-consuming and frivolous. He must have made it recently, engraved the old date on it just to make him feel guilty. Yes, that had to be it. But he could check the workshop's records, or Caleb's CR card statements. He could find out when it was really made. And so what if he did? Why was he even thinking about it? At 4 in the morning, cursing himself for being pathetic, Julian found himself standing by the fountain in front of the office building. It was still dark, the fountain silent. Suddenly, he heard a splashing sound from the pool. He froze. He called out, asking who was there. A choked voice answered. It was Caleb. Damn it. Julian turned to run, but Caleb's tearful voice stopped him. He begged Julian not to go, to help him find it. The fountain would turn on in half an hour, and the circulation system would pull the ring in forever. Julian gritted his teeth and took 2 more steps, then stopped. He was so pathetic. He walked back to the edge of the fountain, pulled out the long-handled skimmer net he had brought from home, and demanded to know if this section had been searched yet. Caleb stared at him, stunned. Julian snapped at him to answer the question. Caleb mumbled that he hadn't searched there yet. They worked in silence, bent over the shallow pool. At one point, their heads bumped together. Julian straightened up, accusing Caleb of doing it on purpose, telling him to leave if he wasn't going to help. Caleb didn't seem to hear. He suddenly ducked his head under the water and then shot up, shouting that he'd found it. Just as he spoke, the fountain jets erupted, drenching him completely. But he stood there like a grinning fool, holding the ring up for Julian to see. Julian laughed. He took the ring and sat on the stone bench at the edge of the fountain. Caleb slowly climbed out of the water and sat down gently beside him. Julian glared and shifted away. The sky began to lighten, turning a soft pink. He held the ring up to the light, squinting. He asked if he really made it himself. Caleb said yes. And he really engraved it? Yes. On their anniversary? Yes. And he really hated him? No, not at all. Damn, the man wouldn't fall for the trick. Julian accused him of lying. Caleb looked at him pleadingly, wanting to say more but hesitating. Julian told him to just spit it out. Caleb said he was afraid that it might make Julian feel sick again. His stomach had actually been fine for a while, but he said that just seeing Caleb was already making him feel ill. Caleb's head dropped. He apologized. Julian waved his hand magnanimously, telling him to just say it, that he would try to hold it in. Caleb looked at him cautiously. He said that 3 years ago, the reason he had approached him that way was because he thought Julian was beautiful, that there was something familiar about him. He had been smitten from the very beginning. Later, he had to remind himself every day not to fall in love with him, but it didn't seem to work. When he couldn't find any evidence, he felt a strange mix of relief and conflict, because he didn't want to break up. It wasn't until Julian had pushed him to come home, and the crash happened, that he thought. Caleb's words trailed off. He watched Julian's face for a reaction. Julian turned to him, asking why he had stopped. Caleb asked if he felt sick. Julian paused, then said no. Caleb's eyes lit up. He asked shamelessly if he could confess again. At that moment, the sun broke over the horizon, bathing them in a golden light. Caleb stared at him, mesmerized. He asked if he could kiss him. Julian told him to get lost. This idiot, this lunatic. He seemed like a completely different person. Well, Julian thought maybe he could be persuaded with great difficulty to get to know him again.